As climate change worsens, transitioning to renewable energy is becoming more and more urgent. Despite this urgency, there are a lot of misconceptions about renewable energy. Today, I'm going to debunk some common myths about clean energy and share 3 important facts about the transition to renewables. The first fact is that we need to phase out fossil fuels now. Burning fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which causes climate change. This means that the sooner we stop burning fossil fuels, the sooner climate change stops getting worse. We're already seeing the negative impacts of climate change, as heat waves, droughts, floods, and massive storms have increased globally. We need to act quickly to keep things from getting worse. Additionally, the air pollution from fossil fuels has horrible impacts that aren't related to climate change. Local air pollution increases the risks of asthma, heart disease, lung cancer, and more. In fact, air pollution kills an estimated 5 million people annually. Again, the sooner we stop burning fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy such as solar and wind, the sooner these needless deaths stop. The second fact about renewables is that natural gas is not a clean source of energy and it is not a good transition fuel. It needs to be phased out with the other greenhouse gases. For years, the gas industry has argued that we need natural gas as a bridge fuel while we transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. This is a very flawed idea for a few reasons. The first reason is that it assumes natural gas will replace other fossil fuels such as coal, when in reality, natural gas usually supplements them. Since energy consumption is growing globally, increases in natural gas usually add to coal consumption instead of replacing it. Instead, we should work to halt the increase in energy consumption by becoming more energy efficient, such as by weatherizing buildings, increasing bikeability and transit access in cities, and revamping heating and cooling systems to use less energy. We should also cover any additional increases in energy consumption with renewables instead of with natural gas. Even if natural gas was replacing coal usage, touting it as a bridge fuel assumes that it has fewer climate impacts than other fossil fuels. This is not true. While natural gas has less carbon dioxide emissions than other fossil fuels such as coal, it has much larger methane emissions. Methane, another greenhouse gas, is just as harmful as carbon dioxide. Methane stays in the atmosphere for a much shorter period of time than CO2, meaning it doesn't contribute to global warming for quite as long. That being said, it is much more potent, meaning while it is in the atmosphere, it has much stronger warming effects. In fact, methane is 28 times as potent as carbon dioxide at trapping heat in the atmosphere. Because of this, methane is responsible for around 30% of the rise in global temperatures since the start of the Industrial Revolution, and this will only rise if we increase natural gas production. Also, even if natural gas did have lower greenhouse gas emissions than coal, it still emits. We do not have time for more emissions. The reason natural gas is even in the conversation as a bridge fuel is because natural gas companies have spent tons of money on PR campaigns to make us think that it is a necessary part of the transition to renewables. But these are the same companies that produce coal and oil, showing that they don't actually support shifting to renewables. Again, these are fossil fuel companies touting one of their fossil fuel products as a way that we can transition away from fossil fuels. You wouldn't listen to a cigarette company telling you that you need to smoke to have a healthy lifestyle, so why are we listening to fossil fuel companies telling us we need natural gas for a healthy economy? There are even more reasons why we need to ditch natural gas now. For example, it takes time to build out new natural gas infrastructure, and this infrastructure can last for over 30 years. Since we need to decarbonize as quickly as possible, it doesn't make sense to lock in over 30 years of future emissions with new gas infrastructure. Also, if we're going to build new energy infrastructure, it might as well be renewable. We already have the renewable energy technologies that we need to transition most of the economy off of fossil fuels, so there's no need for a bridge fuel. Additionally, the economics make more sense for clean energy, since natural gas is more affected by market volatility than renewables. On that note, the third clean energy fact is that renewable energy is actually cheaper than fossil fuels. While there is a common myth that renewables are more expensive than fossil fuels, this is false. According to the United Nations, renewables are the cheapest form of power. Additionally, as we increase investments in and continue to build out renewable energy projects, they will become even more efficient and easier to build, further dropping prices. We know this will happen because it already has to an extent. Adjusting for inflation, fossil fuels cost about the same as they did 100 years ago, whereas the price of solar has dropped by a factor of 5,000 in 55 years. As more improvements are made, the prices will keep dropping. Now, just because renewable energy is cheaper doesn't mean the transition will happen on its own. We need to do a lot of work to improve the electric grid, change renewable energy permitting laws, expand battery infrastructure, and more to make sure that we can use all of this cheap energy. Additionally, we need to prioritize building renewable energy systems in poorer areas, since these places may not have the investments necessary to bring in that renewable energy in the first place. And we need to do all of this incredibly quickly. While the economics are on our side, we need the transition to renewables to happen much faster than it currently is to stave off the worst impacts of climate change. On a quick side note, governments subsidize fossil fuels to the tune of over $1 trillion per year. This artificially lowers the price of fossil fuels and makes them more competitive with renewable energy. While it's impractical to remove all fossil fuel subsidies tomorrow, we must start eliminating these subsidies at a quicker rate. Once fossil fuel subsidies are minimized, which would put them on a level playing field with renewables, the economic argument for fossil fuels will be completely gone. On another quick side note, when you account for implicit subsidies, which include the indirect costs of fossil fuels such as climate change and air pollution, global fossil fuel subsidies soar to a whopping $7 trillion per year. The International Monetary Fund estimates that getting rid of explicit and implicit fossil fuel subsidies would prevent 1.6 million premature deaths annually, raise government revenues by $4.4 trillion, and put emissions on track towards reaching global warming targets. So, at this point you may be asking, why are there so many myths about clean energy, and why are they so prevalent? The answer is money. Fossil fuel companies have tons of money, and they use this money to make sure that they can keep making money. They launch PR campaigns to discredit renewable energy, fund think tanks and politicians that tear down progress on renewables, and generally do everything they can to keep fossil fuel production alive and well. Over the past few years, despite rising energy prices for consumers, oil companies have made record profits to the tune of tens of billions of dollars per year. They have then used these profits to keep their oil empire rolling and screw over their consumers. The sooner we ditch fossil fuels, the sooner we can ditch these evil companies, and the better off our planet will be. Despite rampant myths and misconceptions about the transition to renewable energy, progress is still being made. For example, in 2022, the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate bill in U.S. history. It created jobs in renewable energy production and deployment, made tax credits more accessible to communities looking to implement renewable energy, and much more. Additionally, the Biden administration recently put the permitting process for liquefied natural gas export terminals on pause. These Gulf Coast terminals would have drastically worsened climate change. The 20 proposed terminals would have had similar annual emissions to the entire European Union. The largest of these proposed terminals would have had 20 times the annual emissions as the Willow Project in Alaska. These export terminals would have pumped toxic air into local communities, raised natural gas prices for Americans, and strengthened the fossil fuel industry at a time when it needs to be weakened. Luckily, after heavy pressure from Gulf Coast communities and environmental groups, the Biden administration paused the permitting process and is reevaluating whether the process adequately considers climate risks. There are a lot of things going right for the transition to clean energy, and there is a lot going wrong. But examples like these show that our activism works, and we must keep fighting for our future. So write to your representatives on climate issues, look into joining local environmental groups, and vote for environmentally conscious candidates in your state's primary elections. There's a lot we can do to fight for a better future, so let's do it.